Hi, I'm Callum, and 5 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I trusted my family. They said he was just going through a rough patch, that I should be patient. So I paid his tuition, covered his rent, fixed what he broke. And when he turned on me, when he shoved me, forged my name, drained my account, they didn't ask if I was okay. They asked what I did to provoke him. The worst part, they called me unstable, while he signed my name to a $12,000 theft. And when I showed them proof, they still hugged him. So I left, but not before handing him an envelope that made his face go pale and his voice crack. Now he wants to talk. But what do you say to someone who already decided you were disposable? And if I told you this whole mess started long before the money, would you believe me? Because this isn't about betrayal anymore. This is about who you become when your own family sets you on fire and still expects you to carry the water. Want to know what was in that envelope? You might want to sit down for this. I pulled into the lot behind the community hall just as the sun slid behind the trees. The place wasn't fancy, just a rented room people used for birthday dinners and church gatherings. I sat for a moment with the engine off, letting the quiet settle before I walked in. Tonight was supposed to be a small celebration of family contributions. My mother had used those exact words on the phone, so I figured it had something to do with the years I spent helping them stay afloat. 5 years of tuition payments for Darren, medical bills for Dad, mortgage gaps when they fell behind. I didn't expect a trophy, but I thought my name might at least show up somewhere. The second I stepped inside, a strange chill ran through me. The welcome poster listed Darren's name in bold letters, with a photo of him smiling like the town's newest celebrity. Mine wasn't anywhere. I scanned the tables until I spotted a tiny card with my name folded near the swinging kitchen doors. Every time a server passed through, the door clipped the back of the chair. I stood there for a moment, wondering if it was a mistake, but no one else seemed confused. Folks greeted Darren as if he'd solved world hunger. A couple of neighbors waved at me politely, then drifted back to him like I was nothing more than a familiar face they couldn't place. I took my seat anyway. Habit, I guess. Staying quiet had become second nature in this family. I tried to settle in, looking around for Mom, but she was up front chatting proudly with one of Darren's old professors. Dad stood beside her, arms crossed, nodding along as if everything in this room existed because of their chosen son. I kept a steady breath, reminding myself why I came. To show support. Nothing more. As people finished their plates, the chatter eased. Darren clinked his glass and hopped onto the small stage, trying to act humble while soaking in every set of eyes on him. "Well," he said, "I guess tonight's about the backbone of the family, the one who keeps us going." He paused with a grin and added, "And no, I'm not talking about me paying any bills." The crowd let out an awkward chuckle. Every pair of eyes turned toward me. I forced a small smile, pretending the comment didn't land the way it did. Darren lifted a framed certificate and handed it to Dad. The words, "Honoring the future of the family," were printed across the top in bright gold letters, and under it, only his name. Dad clapped him on the back with a proud laugh. "You earned this," he said, loud enough to bounce off the walls. Mom didn't look at me once. People applauded, some more hesitantly than others. A couple of cousins exchanged uncomfortable glances my way, like they knew something wasn't right, but didn't want to get involved. I stayed in my chair near the kitchen doors, trying not to let the heat rush up my face. Then came the line that turned everything inside me upside down. After the applause died, my parents stepped closer to Darren, speaking to him, but loud enough for half the room to hear. Dad said, "Everything we have will go to him. He deserves it. He's our future." Mom nodded right along, not even glancing in my direction. I felt something cave inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, heavy drop, like a floorboard giving way. I had paid for Darren's degree, covered the debt they didn't want anyone to know about, kept the lights on when they couldn't, and somehow, in one sentence, I stopped existing. People shifted uncomfortably. A few stared down at their plates. Darren looked over at me, smirked, and shrugged like this was how things were always supposed to be. I pushed back from my chair slowly, letting the kitchen door flap once more as I stood. I walked to the far end of the hall, where the lights dimmed near a row of old community posters. I slipped my hand into my pocket and touched the small silver key that hung from my grandfather's old keychain. He'd given it to me when I was a teenager, telling me to protect what matters. Back then, I thought he meant family. Tonight, I wasn't sure that word meant anything at all. Still, as I stood there with the noise behind me fading, something in me moved. Not anger. Not yet. Just the beginning of a shift, like the first crack in a sheet of ice. A thought forming quietly. I looked at the silver key in my hand, wondering when exactly my place in this family had vanished. I didn't start the engine right away. The key was still in my hand, its grooves pressing into my skin, cold and steady, like it had a mind of its own. I stared at the porch light glowing faintly through the living room window of my parents' house. The same light I'd helped rewire after the storm 2 summers ago. Inside, silhouettes moved behind the curtains. Darren's tall frame, Dad's hunched shoulders, Mom's gentle sway. I could hear faint laughter when I rolled down the window slightly. Not a trace of discomfort in their voices. No tension. No regret. I sat there for over 20 minutes. Eventually, I stepped out and locked the truck behind me. Gravel crunched beneath my boots as I walked toward the front door. The air had cooled since earlier. It smelled like pine needles and the beginning of a Texas winter. The key turned smoothly in the lock. Of course it did. I was the one who replaced the lock set last year when the old one jammed. The moment I entered, the warmth of the house wrapped around me like a lie. The TV hummed from the den. My parents were sitting on the couch, Darren on the recliner, everyone holding plates with leftover cake. No one turned around. "Hey, Callum," Mom said casually, not even glancing away from the screen. "You want some dessert? There's chocolate left." I didn't answer. I walked straight past them and up the stairs. My boots were still damp from outside, leaving faint prints on the wood. The hallway light flickered, another thing on the list I'd meant to fix. My old bedroom door creaked open just like it always had. Same faded paint. Same poster of the Astros from a season I barely remembered. I hadn't lived here in over a decade, but it felt like this room had been waiting for me to return to the exact same place. Unchanged, stale, a kind of emotional limbo. I sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping the way it always had under my weight. The same dip I left behind at 18. And like some old song playing on a loop, the memories came flooding back. I was 19 when Darren first failed out of college. I still remember the voicemail from Dad, his voice trembling, not with anger, but desperation. "He just needs another shot, son. Just this once. He's not like you. School's hard for him." I had just started working my first full-time job at the warehouse. I didn't have much, but I paid the bill. Just that one semester. Only, it wasn't just one. It became every semester. Every time he missed a class or dropped out of a major, they'd call me. And every time I paid, quietly. Because family helps family, right? At 25, Darren wrecked the family car. Didn't even call me himself. Mom did. Said the insurance wouldn't cover all of it. Said Dad was too angry to talk. Said, we don't know who else to ask. So I picked up weekend shifts at the gas station while still working full time. I was 30 when Dad had his first health scare. I moved back for 3 months to drive him to dialysis, paid out of pocket for the copays they couldn't cover. When Mom's hours were cut, I chipped in for the mortgage, just until she got back on her feet. Meanwhile, Darren floated between hobbies, changing jobs every 6 months, getting burned out from things he never truly started. But he always showed up with a smile, remembered everyone's birthdays, brought flowers on Mother's Day. That was enough for them. That made him the good son. They'd say things like, he's finding his way, or at least he calls. When it came to me, the compliments were colder. Callum does what he should. That was my badge of honor. Silent, expected responsibility. I leaned back against the headboard, letting the quiet fill the space around me. I had mistaken duty for love. I had let them assign me the role of mule, carry the weight, never question, never ask why the load keeps getting heavier. Earlier tonight, when Dad said, he deserves it, something cracked, not just in my heart, but in the lens I'd been using to look at this family. It wasn't betrayal I felt. Not really. It was clarity, pure and sharp. They weren't blind. They had just gotten comfortable. I stood up and looked around the room. Everything I once cared about here had frozen in time, like the past had never left. My high school yearbook still on the shelf, the broken lamp I never replaced, the baseball glove I used with Grandpa in the backyard, now stiff with dust. I walked over to my desk drawer and opened it without thinking. Inside was the original letter from the university billing office, the one from Darren's second semester. I had kept it all these years, proof, maybe, or a reminder. On top of the letter was a folded thank you note Darren had written in pencil, back when he still felt guilty enough to say something. It was brief, sloppy. Appreciate it, bro. I'll make it up to you someday. Someday never came. I closed the drawer and returned to the bed, the silver key now warm from being in my hand too long. I looked at it again. Really looked. It used to mean something to me. Grandpa had said, this is for protecting what matters. But what if what mattered had already been lost? What happens when the only thing you're protecting is a lie? What happens if I stop carrying them? The thought settled heavily in my mind. What would that house look like without me holding up its foundation? I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But that question, what if I stopped carrying them? It followed me into the night and curled up beside me like an old ache I couldn't shake. By the time the first light hit my window, sleep hadn't come, and my back ached from lying still too long. The house was quiet when I got up. I moved slowly down the hallway, footsteps soft against the wooden floor, careful not to wake anything I wasn't ready to face. But when I reached the bottom of the stairs, the smell of strong coffee greeted me, burnt and bitter, and voices. Not loud, not laughing, just murmurs, sharp, low tones. In the kitchen, Mom sat at the table with a stack of manila folders spread out in front of her. Darren was beside her, flipping through one of them with a pen tapping against his teeth like he was solving a crossword. Dad leaned against the counter, arms crossed, mug in hand. The second I stepped into view, all movement stopped. Darren closed the folder. Mom slid hers underneath another one. Dad sipped his coffee like nothing unusual was happening. But I noticed there was no breakfast laid out, no good morning, no plate waiting for me like always. "You're up early," Mom said, voice tight and sweet like she was offering me a spoonful of syrup. "Got big plans today?" That voice. That same sing-song tone she used when I came home from school asking about why my birthday money was missing from the drawer. The same tone she used when I asked if Darren had taken it. I looked at her, then at the folders. "Just work," I said flatly. "Usual Tuesday." I didn't wait for them to pretend to make small talk. I grabbed my travel mug from the dish rack and poured myself some coffee. It tasted scorched. I drank it anyway. On my way out, Darren gave me a tight-lipped smile, but his eyes never met mine. He always looked straight at you when he was lying. Today, he looked down. The tension stayed with me through the drive to the office. Traffic was light. Clouds hung low, but didn't break. The kind of sky that made you feel like something was about to happen, but it hadn't decided what yet. By 8:15, I was at my desk, logged in, sifting through project files. Routine, boring, predictable. I almost managed to settle into the usual rhythm when a notification popped up on my screen. Monthly transfer processed, $200 to Family Maintenance Fund. My stomach clenched. That account had been closed. I remember doing it myself, sitting in this very office, logged into the bank portal, submitting the final closure forms when Darren said he was finally standing on his own. I even received a confirmation email. I clicked the alert, then clicked again, scrolling through previous months. There it was, same transfer, every 30 days, without fail, dating back nearly a year. I opened the full statement history, each one listed under my name, each one authorized electronically, all from my primary account, no secondary approval. No text confirmation, just withdrawn. I checked the document archive on the banking app. A tuition extension approval. Dated 3 months ago. Signed digitally with my name. I didn't sign it. I didn't even know Darren was enrolled anywhere. I sat perfectly still. This wasn't a miscommunication. It wasn't a mistake. Someone had gone into my personal records, used my stored credentials, maybe even logged in from my own devices when I wasn't home. Someone who knew how I kept things filed. Someone who knew I wouldn't look. Someone who knew I would keep paying. I printed the document, then pulled statements from the last 12 months. I didn't stop to process, just hit print and watched the pages spit out one after another. It was all there, line by line, theft in slow motion, not by strangers, not by scammers in a foreign country, but by people who smiled at me every morning, people I'd sacrificed years for, people who called it helping family. It hit me, harder than last night's embarrassment ever could. They hadn't just disrespected me. They had planned this. My hand hovered over my phone for a long time. I considered calling them. Asking, no, demanding, an explanation. But what would they say? That it was for Darren's future? That I always come through? No, I knew that script by heart. Instead, I sat back in my chair and let the betrayal wash over me. Not like a wave, but like a slow-filling tub. Warm at first, then chilling, then suffocating. This wasn't about money, not really. It was about trust. And they treated mine like it was disposable. My mind went back to last night. My father's proud hand on Darren's shoulder. The phrase still ringing in my ears. He deserves it. And suddenly, the phrase had context. Of course they thought he deserved it. They'd already written the check in my name. I shut the file window, paused, then reopened it. I froze the account. Then I printed every single statement, every signature, every notification. I tucked them neatly into a folder, labeled it fraud, and slid it into the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. The man I had been for most of my life, dutiful, quiet, trusting, would have swallowed this, would have confronted them with a disappointed voice and let them guilt him back into silence. But I wasn't that man anymore. That man stopped existing the moment they signed my name without asking. I got home late that evening. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. I didn't speak. I didn't ask questions. I walked past the living room without so much as a glance toward Darren, who was watching TV like he didn't have a care in the world. Mom called after me, something about dinner being in the oven. I didn't answer, because the next discovery didn't just confirm my suspicions, it detonated everything. I didn't even make it halfway down the hallway before the weight of what I'd uncovered earlier began to pulse behind my eyes. It wasn't shock anymore. Shock is sharp, sudden. This felt heavier, slow, like something settling deep in my ribs and refusing to move. I went to my room, closed the door softly, and sat at the edge of the bed. The house was quiet again, except for the faint drone of the TV downstairs. I could picture them, my parents settled into their usual spots. Darren sprawled out like he owned the place. I waited for anger to rise, or heartache, but what came instead was a strange stillness. Because the next discovery didn't just confirm my suspicions, it detonated everything. Last night's humiliation, this morning's strange behavior, the forged signature, it all lined up. And once the pieces connected, there was no unseeing them. No going back to the version of myself who believed their intentions were clumsy but harmless. I stood, gathered the folder I had brought home, bank statements, printouts, signatures, and headed downstairs. I didn't even remember deciding to do it. My legs simply carried me. Dad was still in the living room, flipping through channels. Mom was in the armchair with her reading glasses on. Darren sat forward on the sofa when I entered, like he sensed something was coming, but didn't know what. "Dad," I said quietly, holding the folder at my side. "We need to talk." The tone in my voice must have surprised him. He muted the TV and looked at me with the kind of patience people use on children who don't understand the rules. "What's going on?" he asked. I placed the folder on the coffee table, opened it, and slid the first page toward him. Someone used my account, for months. Transfers I didn't authorize. A tuition extension I didn't sign. Mom's posture stiffened. Darren's tapping foot stopped cold. Dad picked up the page, barely skimmed it, and sighed. "Callum, you're making this bigger than it needs to be." My chest tightened. Someone signed my name. His jaw twitched, and he set the page back down with an exhale edged in annoyance. "Your role in this family is to keep things steady. You know Darren is trying to get on his feet. He needs a future, something stable to rely on." "My role?" He said it like it was printed on my birth certificate. Mom added softly, "You've always been so capable, honey. You've never struggled like he has. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. You were supposed to. Darren needs a future." I felt something inside me fracture, not with sound or heat, but with clarity. A clean break. This wasn't about money, or paperwork, or misunderstandings. This was the truth they'd been holding quietly between themselves for years. All the nights I stayed late at work to cover bills. All the weekends I spent fixing things around this house instead of resting. All the times I rearranged my own life to make room for theirs. None of it was seen as love. It was seen as duty, obligation, infrastructure, not a son, a system they leaned on, a resource they tapped, disposable the moment it became inconvenient. Dad, I said carefully, you used my name, my accounts. You let Darren access things he had no right to touch. He didn't flinch. We did what the family needed. And with that sentence, the final piece clicked into its place. They didn't feel guilty. They felt justified. Something in me cooled, not numbness, not apathy, just the final stage of waking up. I gathered the papers calmly, squared the edges, closed the folder, every movement precise, steady, deliberate. Mom reached out a hand. Callum, don't be dramatic. Sit down. We can sort this out. Dad's irritation sharpened. Why aren't you saying anything? If you've got something to fix, fix it. Don't stand there pouting. I didn't pout. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg for them to see me differently. I stood. My chair barely made a sound as I pushed it back. Their eyes followed me like they were waiting for the usual apologetic shrug, waiting for me to soften, waiting for the "fine, I'll handle it" they believed was built into my DNA. But I kept walking toward the doorway, past the coffee table, past the couch, past Darren, whose shoulders tensed as I stepped by him. Because for the first time in my life, I finally understood exactly what I was to them and what I wasn't. I reached the hallway just as Dad called after me, tone rising with frustration. Don't walk off when I'm talking to you. That's disrespectful. But I kept moving. My hand was on the rail when I heard footsteps behind me. A different weight, a different cadence. Not my father's, not my mother's, Darren's. And the next blow didn't come from my father. It came from Darren himself. The hallway light flicked on before my hand even left the stair rail. I turned just in time to see Darren storming down the hallway, barefoot, shirt wrinkled, jaw set like he'd been rehearsing this in the mirror. He was gripping his phone so tightly, I thought he'd crush it. You think you're so clever? He said. No greeting, no lead-in. You think I wouldn't find out? I blinked, still not fully awake. Find out what? He shoved his phone an inch from my face. On the screen, screenshots, text messages, dozens of them, all supposedly from me. They weren't. Each message crafted like poison. Cut you off again if you don't start pulling your weight. You owe me. I own everything you've got. You'll always be second-rate, Darren. They were fake, fabricated, styled to look just like my tone, my punctuation. But none of those words were mine. This is garbage, I said, trying to push the phone away. He didn't budge. You don't get to bully me and then call it garbage. You've been doing this my whole life. I let out a breath. Long, controlled. I haven't bullied you, Darren. I paid your tuition. I covered your wrecked car. I gave you chances. You controlled me, he snapped. And now you're upset I'm not kissing your shoes for it. Because you lied. Because you forged my name. Because... You think you're better than us, don't you? He barked, cutting me off. His voice bounced off the narrow hallway walls. Us, not better than him, better than us. He believed he and our parents were one side, and I was the outsider. Behind him, a door creaked open. Mom's bedroom. She shuffled into the hallway in her robe, rubbing her eyes. What's going on? He's accusing me of theft, Darren said before I could speak, of lying, of using him. Mom turned to me, no question in her eyes, only a soft sort of panic. Callum, are you okay? Did you scare him again? Again? The word hit like a slap. When? I asked, voice low. Have I ever scared him? She didn't answer, didn't even meet my eyes. The silence said everything. I looked between them, Darren, panting slightly from the performance, and Mom, cradling his elbow like he was the one under attack. He made the messages up, I said. Look at the metadata. Look at the timestamps. They're from an unknown number routed through a spoofing app. It's not hard to fake. You don't have to explain everything like we're idiots, Mom snapped. Her voice caught me off guard. You've always been so stern, she said, quieter now. So cold. You talk like everyone's beneath you. You don't realize how you sound. There it was, the resentment. Not sudden, not new, stored, carried, polished maybe, over years. I paid for your mortgage, I said. You never let us forget, she replied. That stung more than anything Darren had said. I never said a word, whispered. But we felt it, she answered. I looked at her, really looked, at the corners of her eyes drawn tight, at the tiredness that wasn't from sleep but from years of quietly keeping score. Maybe she thought I did too. Maybe they all assumed every silent sacrifice came with a price tag. I need space, I said finally. Darren laughed, a sharp, hollow thing. Of course you do. That's what people say when they're losing control. That was what he wanted. For me to blow up. To confirm the narrative he'd built. That I was the angry, dangerous one. The overbearing brother. The emotionally manipulative son. But I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I walked past him. Down the stairs. The air in the house felt tight. Stale. Like breathing through cotton. I reached the bottom step, shoes still by the door where I'd left them last night. My hand was halfway to the doorknob when I heard him behind me. Fast steps, a muttered curse, then something else, something small, sharp. I turned in time to see it, a family photo in a wooden frame, one of the only ones where we were all smiling. It sailed through the air and struck the wall next to me, shattering into pieces. The sound was loud enough to draw Dad out of the kitchen. What the hell is going on? I didn't answer. I just stared at the shards on the floor. Glass, wood. A crooked smile captured in a moment that now felt like a lie. Darren stood at the top of the stairs, breathing hard. And all I could think was, he wasn't just trying to rewrite the story. He was trying to end mine. For a split second, the world went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that wraps around you when danger steps through the door. Darren wasn't just trying to twist the story anymore. He wanted to make sure there was no version of events where I walked away clean. I had one foot on the floor by the front door when it happened. His palm crashed into my shoulder hard enough that my entire body jolted sideways. The railing caught my ribs. A sharp pulse shot down my arm. Before I could even steady myself, he was already shouting, "Dad! Mom!" He lunged at me. I told you he'd snap. Lunged, I was facing the door. I hadn't even turned toward him, but he said it with so much force that the lie hit the room faster than the truth ever could. Dad hurried in first, socks sliding a little on the hardwood. He planted himself between us like he needed to shield Darren. Mom rushed behind him, hands shaking as she reached for Darren's arm. "Sweetheart, are you hurt? Did he push you?" Hurt. By me. The one who was shoved. I kept my voice steady. He shoved me. On purpose. Darren pointed at me with the hand that still held his phone. He slipped. I tried to catch him. But he's out of control. Look at him. Out of control? I hadn't even raised my voice. Dad let out a breath through his nose. One of those breaths that sounded like disappointment shaped into sound. He didn't check on my shoulder. Didn't ask a single question. Didn't even look at the part of the railing I'd slammed into. "Callum," Dad said, "you need to cool off." Cool off. The phrase slid under my skin. No matter what I said next, the judgment had already been passed. Mom stroked Darren's shoulder the way she used to when he'd pretend to cry as a teenager. "You've been under pressure," she said softly, more to Darren than me. "That's why he's acting this way." Acting this way. Not being treated this way. Their minds weren't open to facts. Not after everything Darren had fed them. Not after years of quietly deciding what my role in the family was supposed to be. I stepped back, trying to breathe through the tightening in my chest. The room felt smaller than it ever had. Every framed photo on the wall felt like a staged lie. Smiles that didn't match the truth of how we lived underneath. I turned toward the door again, ready to walk out before I said something I'd regret. That was when Darren leaned in, close enough that the heat of his breath brushed my ear. "You're done here," he whispered. "I'm taking what's mine, and they'll help me do it." The honesty of it chilled me. He stepped right back into his role, voice trembling just enough to sell the performance. See how he acts? He's scaring me again. Again. That word kept coming up. A story repeated enough times eventually becomes the version people believe, not because it's true, but because it's familiar. Dad straightened, his jaw tight. "Maybe we should call someone, a counselor, a doctor. Something's not right with you lately. Son." He still used the word, but it didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. It wasn't connection, it was formality. "We need to protect this family," he said. "Darren is vulnerable." Vulnerable. The same grown man who shoved me down a stairway. I swallowed and found my breath again. Not shaky, not panicked, controlled. Because if I didn't control it, they'd use that too. "I'm going outside," I said quietly. Mom didn't stop me. Dad didn't call after me. Darren didn't need to. I stepped out into the driveway, letting the cool morning air wash over me. The sky was still gray. A thin mist clung to the street. I stayed there for a full minute, hands at my sides, listening to the hum inside my skull settle. Behind me, through the window, I saw the three of them move together in one shape. My family, my blood, all pressed close around Darren, comforting him, forming a wall around the person who hurt me. Dad's hand rested on Darren's back, Mom's head against his shoulder. They looked like a portrait of unity. I was nowhere in the frame. Not anymore. What shocked me wasn't the betrayal. That had been happening in pieces for years. No, the shock came from something quieter, heavier, a realization that sat deep in my chest. I wasn't part of this family. Not in the way I believed. Not in the way that mattered. The pain was sharp, but beneath it, a new sensation began to rise. Something steadier. Something that felt less like breaking and more like shifting into place. A quiet resolve. Because when I got into my truck, turned the key, and watched the house shrink in my rearview mirror, I understood something I hadn't seen clearly until now. They weren't just after my dignity. They were preparing to take something far larger. And my gut told me what it was before I even saw the screen. I was still sitting in the truck, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me upright, when my phone buzzed beside me. New bank alert, withdrawal request, $2,500 pending verification. I stared at it. The numbers sat bold and smug on the screen like they knew exactly what they were doing. 12,500. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, just enough to hurt. Just below the threshold where most banks wouldn't call right away, but enough to gut the savings I'd built over years of careful planning. I hadn't authorized anything. I hadn't even touched my account since yesterday. My chest tightened. My mind snapped into clarity. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This wasn't tension around a dinner table or someone saying something they couldn't take back. This was theft, and it had my brother's fingerprints all over it. I hit the call button on my banking app. It rang twice before a voice answered, calm and chipper in a way that felt completely detached from the fire building in my gut. "Good morning. This is Savannah at First Horizon Bank. How can I assist you today?" I kept my voice steady. "There's a pending withdrawal on my account, $2,500. I didn't request it." She asked for my details, name, account number, phone passcode. I gave them all without hesitation. She clicked around for a few seconds. "Yes, I see it. We flagged the request because it was made from an unrecognized IP address and a new device. That's our policy for larger transfers." That stopped me cold. "Can you tell me who made the request?" She hesitated. "The email associated with the transaction request was sent from an account ending in Reddick Mail." I didn't even need to hear the rest. "Who signed the email?" I asked. She was quiet for a second. "It was signed by Darren Reddick." I sat back against the headrest, eyes fixed on the windshield but seeing nothing. He wasn't just siphoning money now. He was using my name, my authority. He was trying to wear my identity like a jacket and walk through doors meant for me. "You should also know," the banker added, cautious now. "We received a follow-up request this morning to reinstate your power of attorney documentation." My whole body tensed. That was revoked years ago. It shouldn't even exist. "I understand, sir," she said, "but we received a scanned document claiming to be an updated POA with Darren Reddick listed as your authorized representative. It came in about 20 minutes ago." 20 minutes. The same time I'd been standing in my own driveway, watching my family close ranks around him. He was already trying to own me on paper. I ended the call. No need for more explanations. Not now. I threw the truck in gear and pulled out onto the street, the tires rolling over wet asphalt like they had a destination long before I did. The drive to the bank was a blur. Traffic lights, open fields, the red and white stripes of a feed store sign I must have passed 100 times before, but never really seen. My jaw clenched tighter with every turn. Darren didn't come up with this plan on his own. He never could have navigated financial documents like these. He barely read his lease when he moved out the first time. No, someone helped him. Gave him the documents, walked him through the steps. Probably my parents. Maybe even encouraged it. All the signs had been there. The forged tuition payment, the reactivation of old financial ties, the sudden reappearance of a guardianship envelope. This wasn't desperation. It was strategy. It was war. I pulled into the bank branch parking lot at 7:42 a.m., the sun just barely cresting over the buildings. The parking lot was mostly empty, only the teller's cars, lined up neatly like obedient thoughts. Inside, the air was chilled and quiet. A middle-aged woman in a green blouse greeted me by name and led me straight to a private office. The seriousness in her tone told me someone had briefed her already. She handed me a manila folder and said, "These are the forms tied to the request. I printed everything." I opened the folder. The first page was the transfer request, my name, my routing number, a near-perfect signature. Almost. The curve of the C was off. Mine curved right, with a tight hook. This one swept lazily to the left. Sloppy, but clever enough for someone who thought I wouldn't notice. "He copied my signature," I said. She nodded, face tense. "It's forgery, plain and simple." I didn't need her to say more, but she did. "There's also this," she said, sliding over another page. I picked it up. It was the email from Darren. "Per prior family agreement, I am authorized to manage Callum's accounts. He is currently unwell and unable to handle finances at this time. Attached is the updated POA. Unwell." The word turned my stomach. The same word my father used less than an hour ago. They were building a case, one line at a time, one false assumption after another. First in the house, now on paper. To the world, they were painting me as unstable, erratic, someone who needed help managing his life. That wasn't concern. That was control. The banker watched me carefully. "Would you like to freeze the account now, sir?" I looked her square in the eye. "No, I want to freeze everything. Every savings and checking account, every automatic payment, every backup login. I want a full transaction history printed, and I want copies of these documents." She nodded without hesitation. "I'll get on it." As she walked away, I closed my eyes. Just for a second. This wasn't just about proving a point anymore. This wasn't about being hurt or humiliated or even betrayed. This was about reclaiming my name, my future, my freedom from a family that saw me as a tool, a safety net, a line of credit with legs. When the banker returned, she handed me a thick stack of papers, my name printed again and again across pages that weren't mine, but would become the proof I needed. I didn't thank her with words. I just nodded, tucked the stack under my arm, and walked out into the rising sun. And as the door closed behind me, I felt it. Not just pain, not just anger, but the start of something firmer. Something more solid than hope. Resolve. Because when I returned home with those documents in hand, I wasn't just prepared to defend myself. I was ready to take back everything they tried to rewrite. And maybe, just maybe, remind them who they were dealing with. But I didn't even make it to the front porch before the next ambush arrived. A black and white patrol car eased into the driveway behind me. The soft thump of its engine going quiet made the air feel heavier. A tall officer with salt and pepper hair stepped out slowly, eyes alert but not aggressive. "Mr. Reddick?" he asked, checking something on a notepad. I stayed beside my truck, bank documents still under my arm. "That's me." "I'm Officer Ramirez. We got a wellness call from this address. Said you were acting erratic, possibly aggressive, and might be a danger to yourself or others." The words landed like gravel in my throat. Dangerous, aggressive, unstable. They weren't just repeating what Darren had written in that bank email. They were broadcasting it. "I've been at First Horizon Bank all morning," I said, "and I have proof someone tried to impersonate me and steal from my accounts. That's why I'm here." He didn't reach for his cuffs, didn't radio in backup, just studied me for a beat, eyes narrowing slightly. "Whatever this is," he said evenly, "you should handle it in there, but I'll stay parked nearby. If anything escalates, you call me directly." I nodded once. Fair enough. He walked back to his cruiser as I turned toward the house. The front door was open just enough to let warm air spill out, but not enough to be welcoming. They were expecting me, and judging by the silence behind that door, they were ready. I stepped inside. Everyone was already there. My father sat at the head of the dining table, like he used to during Sunday night dinners before Mom started eating alone in the den. His hands were clasped in front of him, shoulders tense. My mother stood near the kitchen island, wringing a dish towel she didn't seem to realize she was holding. Darren leaned casually against the counter beside her, arms crossed, face smug. Taylor was seated at the far end, posture stiff, hands folded tight in her lap. She didn't look up. My footsteps echoed. My father spoke first. "Son, we need to talk about your behavior." That word again. Behavior, as if I were a teenager getting called out for skipping class. Darren pushed off the counter like he was entering a stage. "You scared Mom this morning," he said, pointing at me. "You slammed doors. You were yelling. She called me sobbing." I looked at my mother. She didn't confirm it, but she didn't deny it either. Her eyes flinched away from mine. That was all it took. Darren pressed on. "We're not trying to hurt you, but you're clearly under stress. You've been slipping. This is about protecting the family. The family. From me." I let the silence stretch. I wasn't here to argue. I was here to end this. My father reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder. He slid it across the table. Inside, a formal complaint, typed and signed, Darren's handwriting. In the witness section, it accused me of erratic and unstable behavior, citing incidents of shouting and intimidation. But the kicker? A handwritten request, signed by my mother, for temporary guardianship over my affairs. Not POA. Guardianship. Like I was a danger to myself. A legal liability. A grown man they were now trying to declare incompetent. My hands didn't shake as I opened my own folder and laid it on the table. "Are you done?" I asked. They didn't answer. I pulled out the forged power of attorney. The withdrawal authorization, the email Darren sent, the timestamps, the forged signature with the telltale left-leaning C. I slid each piece across the table, one by one, deliberate. "This is what I've been dealing with while you were rehearsing an intervention." My mother leaned in first. Her eyes darted over the signatures. She paled. "Darren!" Her voice cracked. "What is this?" He froze. I was just helping. He needed oversight. He wasn't acting normal." I looked straight at him. "You impersonated me. You accessed my financial records. You tried to reinstate control over my accounts after I revoked it." No one breathed. Taylor finally looked up, her eyes wide. "You said you were helping," she whispered. "You said he asked you." "I did," Darren shot back. "He just doesn't remember it right now." He reached for the documents, fast, like ripping off a bandage, but I pulled them back before his fingers touched them. That's when he cracked. "You think you're better than us?" His voice rose, eyes blazing. "You always have. You think just because you paid for college or bought groceries or fixed Dad's truck that you're the hero of this family?" His fists clenched. "I deserve that account. I deserve to have a say in this house." And there it was. The truth. No more lies. No more manipulations. Just greed. He lunged again, this time trying to tear the whole folder from my hand. My elbow knocked the table as I yanked it away. My father finally stood and grabbed Darren by the arm, yanking him back. "What did you do, son?" he demanded. Darren turned on him. "I did what you never had the guts to do. I took what should have been mine." The shouting was loud enough that I didn't even notice Officer Ramirez step into the doorway. "Everything all right here?" he asked, voice steady but unmistakably present. Everyone froze. Darren opened his mouth, but I got there first. "Officer," I said calmly, "this is the man who filed the wellness report on me this morning. He's also the one who attempted to steal $12,500 from my account through a forged email and a fake POA." Ramirez looked to Darren, then to me, then to the documents. "Is that true?" he asked. Darren couldn't form a sentence. He stammered, shifted, looked to my parents for backup. None came. My mother had sat down, face pale. My father was still holding Darren's arm, but his grip had loosened. He looked down now, like he didn't recognize the son standing in front of him. Taylor stood slowly and walked toward me. Not him. She didn't say anything, just stood close. That said more than any defense. Ramirez gave me a nod. "Call me if you want to file anything formal," he said. "For now, I'll give you all some space." He stepped back out, leaving the silence behind him. The family meeting was over, and so was the illusion. My father sank into his chair, hands covering his face. My mother whispered Darren's name like a prayer that wouldn't be answered. I looked at each of them, one by one. "You wanted guardianship?" I said quietly. "From this point on, you'll need it for yourselves." And I turned, documents in hand. I didn't flinch when the front door clicked shut behind me. Didn't look back. Didn't wonder what they were thinking now. Officer Ramirez stood beside his car as I passed, and he gave me a look, not of sympathy, but respect. Not a nod of pity. A quiet acknowledgement. I climbed into my truck and shut the door, and just as I slid the key into the ignition, my phone buzzed. A new message appeared on the screen. One name. A name I hadn't seen in years. And just like that, everything shifted again. Like the air around me thickened, warning me this morning wasn't finished with me yet. I stayed still in the driver's seat, letting the engine stay off while I tried to catch my breath. My hands were still warm from gripping the documents, the ones that finally brought the truth to light. I thought the fight was over. I thought walking out meant an ending. Then my phone buzzed. A voicemail transcription slid across the screen, each word punching harder than the last. "Urgent. A second withdrawal attempt was made from your account, flagged as high risk. Please contact us immediately." A second attempt. After everything that happened in that house. After the lies unraveled right in front of my parents. After Officer Ramirez stepped in. He didn't stop. Darren had doubled down, even with evidence stacked against him. And that told me everything I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't about desperation. It wasn't about fear. He wanted control, no matter what he had to destroy to get it. I dialed the bank immediately, putting the phone on speaker as I started the truck and pulled away from the curb. The call connected just as I reached the main road. "Mr. Reddick," the fraud officer said, voice professional but weighted with concern. "We flagged another attempt. This one was routed through an international account." My stomach tightened. "When?" 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes, which meant Darren tried again after I walked out, after he knew the truth had surfaced. "Do you have any record of who authorized it?" I asked. "We do," she said. "We have audio." My foot eased off the gas. The road blurred slightly as I blinked. "Play it," I said. There was a soft crackle, a moment of static. Then, clear as if he were sitting beside me, Darren's voice. "Yes, I'm Callum Reddick. I'm authorizing the transfer. He's not well today." Not well, the exact phrase my father used. The same lie they built around me since childhood, repackaged as a weapon to pry open my accounts. But this time, it wasn't whispered in a kitchen or passed through family gossip. It was recorded. The officer spoke again. "We can pursue this formally. Given what we already have, the case is strong." I leaned back against the seat, letting that sink in. For once, guilt didn't wrap itself around my ribs. No hesitation, no bargaining. Just quiet understanding of what needed to happen. "Yes," I said softly. "Keep the file open." I didn't rush home. I didn't go back to College Station at all. I drove straight toward Brian, the small duplex I'd been fixing up over the past month. I'd never told my parents about it, not because I meant to hide it, but because every time I planned to mention it, something in their voices told me they'd find a way to twist it. The duplex wasn't fancy. One level, narrow porch, a yard that needed more mowing than I had time for. But it was mine. No ghosts, no tension, no expectations that I'd sacrifice myself to keep the peace. I parked and walked up to the steps, letting the wood creak under my weight. For a long moment, I just sat there, thinking I could press charges, let him face the consequences he'd built for himself, or I could walk away from the entire mess and never look back. But the real question wasn't about punishment. It was this. Was I finally ready to stop carrying them? My phone rang again around mid-afternoon. Taylor. Her voice was thin, tremoring. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear, Callum, I didn't know what he was planning. I just thought he was trying to fix things." I believed her. She was the only one who ever tried to warn me, even if she never said it outright. "It's not on you," I told her. "You didn't do this." She exhaled shakily. "Are you okay?" "For the first time in a long time," I said. "I think I might be." After that, a text from my mother flashed across the screen. I don't know him, just 4 words. But it was the first honest thing she'd said in weeks. I let the phone rest face down on the porch beside me. Some messages didn't need replies. The bank followed up an hour later. The formal complaint was processed. Darren's attempt now sat in a growing file. Audio, forged documents, digital trails. Everything he had touched with the intent to take something from me was now preserved. I didn't stop it. I didn't encourage it either. I just let the system do its job. By late afternoon, I got confirmation. The fraud report would be on Darren's record. Any guardianship claims he tried to file were void. Every access point he thought he'd gained was sealed tight. I hadn't ruined him. He'd done that himself. I walked inside the duplex, the place still smelling faintly of fresh paint. I brewed a pot of strong black coffee and sat at the small kitchen table. Sunlight fell across the room in soft lines, hitting the edge of a half-built shelf I'd been working on. My phone buzzed again. Darren. Just 2 words. You won. A younger version of me, the boy who bent over backward to keep peace, who thought being useful was the only way to earn love, would have broken down at those words. Would have felt guilty for finally protecting himself. But now, reading them, I didn't feel victory. Just understanding. Because I hadn't won. I had finally stopped losing. The next week, I returned to work. Colleagues mentioned I seemed lighter, more focused. Even my supervisor asked if I'd taken a vacation. I almost laughed. Nothing about the last few days felt restful. But something inside me had been rebuilt. I'd stopped carrying 30 years of weight on my shoulders. Not because my family finally apologized. Not because justice was loud or dramatic. But because I put down what they kept handing me. Later that evening, I sat on the porch again, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The air felt calm, real, honest. I thought about everything that happened. Family isn't determined by blood. Family is determined by respect, by boundaries, by people who don't weaponize your silence or punish you for growing. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes peace starts with a decision to stop rescuing people who enjoy watching you drown. As the sky shifted into warm gold, I stepped inside and locked the door, not out of fear, out of intention, a quiet claim of a new beginning, Something settled inside me. Not revenge, not triumph. Freedom.